In round 2 of the World Cup, no less than 22 of the 32 matches went to tie-break. And those matches took place today. Now, there's so much action going on. Blunders and brilliances, some amazing chess played. I found it really difficult to pick just one game. So I'm going to offer you something a little bit different, a little selection of games that caught my eye, just little snippets of games. So the first one I'd like to look at is the game between Bader Jobava and Yu Yangyi. And this was, they'd already drawn the first two 25-minute games in the tiebreak. So this was the first of the 10-minute games. Jobava with white, now, he played one of his, curious little opening systems with b3. And they've reached actually a very orthodox kind of position. It's a reversed hedgehog. You can see these pawns along the third rank block out black's pieces. But of course white is, well, not occupying a huge amount of space, but it's very hard for black to break in. Black has constructed this so-called Marozzi bind with pawns on e5 and c5, which keep white in check, but typical hedgehog position, so very hard for black to make progress. In the meantime, white is trying to break out with either b4 or d4. Tricky position. So I think especially in games with a fast time limit, well, in normal chess this is a very decent system, of course, but particularly in games with a fast time limit, I think it's an excellent system for Jobava to play. Because I think with black you have to be, if you take on the space, you have to play very accurately. And Yu Yangyi failed to do that. It's not an easy position to play. So he thought that white might be threatening to break out with d4, so he put the knight back on e7. So you can see there's knights, pawns, rook and queen looking at d4. Well, d4 has been prevented, but that allows b4 as the knight has withdrawn, because it was controlling b4. And b4 strategically is highly desirable for white, because you break down black's centre, and this b pawn does an excellent job of controlling these two pawns on the queen side. Also, this knight is somewhat sidelined. And things progressed for white, because after this exchange then d4 came. So you can see that white now is able to take control over the centre, and black's king looks a little bit insecure compared to white's, which is very, very safe. Probably black should trade here, but I can understand why you decided not to do that, because it seems to open up white's pieces. White definitely has some kind of practical advantage there. Instead you played bishop b7, hitting the knight, but he clearly underestimated this splendid sacrifice. Really interesting. So first of all, if queen takes, then pawn takes, and there's trouble on the long diagonal. Queen comes here to try and block. Once the queen is forced away, then e6 will open the diagonal and win material. So king takes, and the king drops back. Well, at first it looks as though black has everything under control. He's a piece up and there's no obvious continuation for white, but Bader had seen further. e6 is a beautiful sacrifice just to clear the lines, to open the lines for white's pieces. First of all, if that's taken, then knight g5 check, forks king and queen. So king takes, and now the king staggers into the middle. e4. So white just has this beautiful rolling initiative. Queen check. Now if the king comes to f6, then we can force the king up the board, and this looks just fatal. So the king went to d6, and now really beautiful move. Remember, this is a 10-minute game. But Bardo played this attack with real finesse. Rook c1. So that prevents Black's king from ducking back behind the barricades. And the king is stuck. I mean, one idea would be to play queen d8 to allow the king back, but this attack just continues. H4 threatening knight g5, queen e3. I mean, this is really nasty with the king staggering around in the middle. You took the pawn on e4, but now queen d2 check, knight g5 check, king came up, g4 check, king comes back, and this simply wins material. If the king moves back to f7, then queen f4 check, followed by knight f6. So in this position, you took the knight, but then queen takes, and well, now white is just an exchange up. So Bardo won that game very, very easily. And well, Bardo went on to win the second game as well, second 10-minute game. So Bardo Jobava goes through into the third round, and Yu Yangyi is out. Okay, next game. This was a very surprising game. Richard Rapport, young Hungarian player, very exciting player, against Wei Yi. Wei Yi rated 27.48, Rapport 26.75. We know that Rapport is a very dangerous attacking player, but here he plays a beautiful technical game. So he won the exchange. We joined the game after 41 moves, and it's typical technical position with symmetrical pawns on the king's side, and white has a rook against the bishop. What impressed me here was that Rapport clearly knew exactly what to do. His technique was perfect. Remember, this is a 25-minute game. But Rapport didn't hesitate at all. He knew exactly what he was doing. First of all, he brings the king as far up the board as possible. By the way, Black had to play f5 because otherwise the king would come here and you take on f7. So f5 is the best defense. Again, no hesitation from Rapport. He fixes the pawns with f4. And now he needs to bring his king in, which he does on the light squares, of course. And he's makes sure that this rook controls the bishop squares, so the bishop can't get round to attack this g3 pawn. And the king is forced. Well, I mean, the king dives to the side, but the king, the white king, can't be prevented from getting to e6. Now, again, excellent technique. He makes sure that this pawn is defended, so no problems there. Now, the bishop stays on the long diagonal, so white's king can't actually make progress, can't get into f6. However, there is a tried and tested method for breaking open black's position, and that's to play g4. Again, Rapport did not hesitate over playing this move g4. He knew exactly what he was doing. Now, if f takes, then we blast our way through, and the king gets to the h-pawn and then cleans up. h6, g4 played. Second pawn sack with h5. Well, if that's taken, then the king comes across and takes both pawns. So king g7, a check. This is very nice. And now rook f7. So he just wants to take this pawn. If g3, we take, and the pawn gets captured. So bishop c1, a rook takes pawn. And, well, here Wei Yi played king h6 and he resigned in this position. It's a very easy win. The king comes to e5 and then the rook comes to g5 and cleans up. One last try, it's quite interesting. You could play bishop takes pawn here, hoping that the king is going to support the g-pawn coming down the board. But here there's a very nice win. It's not too difficult, but it's sweet. And now just rook to the back, and we clean up. If king g4, you give a check, and king f3, and you take the pawn. Brilliant technique from Rapport. Remember, this was a rapid play game. Okay, next game. Samuel Sevian, young American player, against Li Chao. Li Chao outrates him. Now, this was the second of the 25-minute games. The first one was drawn, and it looks as though Sevian has reached a drawn position with rook and knight against rook. Should be a draw, but the king is a little bit stuck, so you've got to be careful. Knight b4 check. Now, the king can't come up the board because there's a deadly skewer, winning the rook on a8. So king b2, correct. Rook e2 check. Now remember, you're short of time. Where do you put your king? Instinctively, you don't want to play your king to the back rank. But that was actually the correct move. White is still drawing here. So for example, after this, you could play rook c8, preventing the king coming over. And if knight d5 looks terrifying, because knight c3 check is threatened, but then we just play rook d8, pinning the knight. This is still drawn. But after rook e2, Sevian played the natural move, which is to bring your king up the board. It looks the safest move, but after knight check, the king had to go forward, and then that must have been painful. Knight forks king and rook, and incredibly black wins. So Sevian went out. Li Chao progresses into round 3. Fabiano Caruana, let's catch up with another American player. First two 25-minute games were drawn. This is the first of the 10-minute games, and Caruana is in complete control. You can see he has an extra pawn. This bishop completely dominates the knight here. Let's get some nice red arrows. That's better. That knight really dominated, and in combination with the rook, this is a winning position. Rook a6, so Caruana plays perfectly. He just keeps hitting on the weaknesses, threatening the pawn, threatens the knight, so just gives black no peace at all. And now a check. King comes up. Still you've got to protect the H pawn, but now a check. So is black hanging on? No, not after this next move. Rook g5. Now that is a beautiful killer move, threatening bishop g7 checkmate. Of course, black can give up the rook for the bishop, but it's utterly lost. Very nice finish from Caruana. Very clean indeed. And in fact, he won the second 10-minute game. So Caruana progresses into round 3. Next game, Nakamura. How's Naka doing? Well, he made very light work of Bruzon, the Cuban player. You can see here Caruana has an absolutely dominating position. This came from a Catalan, but of course it's a French structure. But you can see that black's has no connection between the rooks. This bishop is wonderful, has no opponent. So let's see how Nakamura did it. First of all, he traded off the rooks. Well, if that second rook can't come over, and this was good strategy, he's just claiming control of the c-file. But he can play on both sides of the board, so now he's really rubbing it in, because basically he could here just push with f5, but no, he lets black sweat, just dominating on the c-file. Bishop d3. So he might play bishop b5. Queen e8. Bishop b5 is possible, but no, he switches over back to the king's side again and plays f5. So black just doesn't know whether he's coming or going here. It's a world of pain that black has entered, an absolutely horrible position. So basically, you know, Naka wants to push with f6. and mate black on the king side, but is also keeping complete control on the queen side. Bruzon lashed out with knight b4, but this was hopeless. Two pieces attacked. The bishop defends the knight, but now pawns go. Bishop e7 hits the knight. Knight a2. The rook comes over. f6. I mean, queen d2, and here Bruzon decided enough was enough. He's losing the knight, but he's also getting checkmated on the king side as well. It's just a horrible position. So Naka in complete control in the 25-minute games. Went through very easily. One final game to finish. This was from the match between Martin Kravtsev from Ukraine and Ding Liren. This was the first of the 25-minute games. Ding has two extra pawns in the rook and pawn endgame. Of course, it's a very simple win. But watch how Ding did it. This is very nice. a2. He wants to get a queen, so rook came behind, and if black gets a queen, then rook check and takes the queen. But what did Ding do? He played rook c2 check, pushing the king away. If the king goes away, it's absolutely hopeless. So, for example, here you could play that move, and then here. So the king came to b3, and now instead of making a queen, he made a knight and gave checkmate. Very sweet finish. So, well, that's just a little selection of some of the tie-break games. In round 3, let me give you a quick heads up for some of the matchups. Carlsen plays Bu. Grishuk plays Navarra. Now that should be really entertaining. Kramnik plays Ivanchuk. I can't wait for that one. And Nepomniachtchi plays Jabava. That should be very entertaining as well. Whew. See you in round 3.